Welcome to Detroit. Doesn't matter if you have one ass cheek and 3 toes. I will beat your ass. You can drown them. And that's what we gotta be. That's who we have to be. Because that's our domain. That is our domain. Because we'll tread water as long as it takes to fucking bury you.
Takes the snap, turns, gives to Montgomery, right side, end zone, touchdown, Detroit Lions! Yes.
We are driven by Detroit.
Hello, Detroit Lions friends, fans, and family members. Welcome on back to yet another episode of MCM Motor City Mania. I'm your host, David T. Pike, and as always, we're diving on in. So folks, I know I'm pushing out a lot of content today. Part of that is because I didn't really push out a whole lot at the end of the week. There were a couple of reasons for that. Won't go into them too much here, but for today's topic, as far as this episode is concerned, we're going to talk about something that I guarantee you there's quite a number of Lions fans right now that are thinking about this. And the reason why I can guarantee you they're thinking about it is because of how the game against the Bengals yesterday, it ended. And we have to understand something here. There's going to be some mixed feelings about the whole Bengals game as far as, okay, you know what? Offense didn't play as clean of a game as what people wanted it to. I myself know that. I myself recognize that. But it's like, hey, you know what? Let's just call it for what it is. If the offense isn't playing the most cleanest game that it normally does and it's still putting up 35 points, you be fine. And what it lets me know is that, okay, once the offense is like hitting on all cylinders, like all 8 instead of like only 7, this offense is going to just absolutely be a juggernaut that nobody's going to be able to stop. But we're not talking about the offense here. The offense, I think, is fine. Everybody's got their own thoughts and opinions on it, but the offense is fine. I mean, for crying out loud, when you literally are the number one scoring offense in the NFL with 174 points, you're fine. At that point, then, you're literally splitting hairs. However, though, when it comes to the other side of the ball, there is a problem. Now, depending upon your level of panic meter and depending upon how quick you are to push the panic button, it could be a small problem or it could be a really, really big problem. The problem that I'm referring to at this point is the defensive secondary. Now, I have to put this in the right context and I have to put this in the right perspective. Otherwise, this is not going to make a whole hell of a lot of sense because I know there's going to be some people out there being like, well, David, how is the secondary a problem? We have 6 interceptions. We just intercepted, the Bengals quarterback 3 times. How is that necessarily a problem? The problem isn't necessarily in the Lions' ability to get turnovers. That is not a problem. I mean, for crying out loud, Kirby Joseph is still by far the best ball-hawking safety in the entirety of the NFL. Meek Robertson does what he does. So it's like, okay, the Lions clearly have some dogs in that secondary. The problem is that some of them dogs are in, kind of like in the dog house, not necessarily in a bad sense, but they're recovering, they're resting, they're trying to get, healthy. And that's where the problem comes into play. Everybody knows going into that game that we were not going to have DJ Reed. The reason why is because he's on IR to return. He's not going to be back for another 3 more weeks while he's recovering from the hamstring injury that he got against the Browns. Now, on top of that, there's the whole situation as far as the health and capability of Terrion Arnold. Right now, I'm going to tell you this. When it comes to a lot of people, the whole Terrion Arnold conversation is a very, very divided one. There are some people out there that are like, listen, there's a lot of people that are just getting down on this young man. They're not giving him a chance. They're just wanting to blow everything up and just make him sound bad and make him look bad the whole 9 yards. I understand that side of the argument. I also understand the other side of the argument. It's like, okay, here. We understand this guy is a very physical corner. We understand that this guy likes to get very physical and he likes to use his hands. The problem is that you can't continue to play that way within the current confines of the NFL. Otherwise, we're going to continue to see the problems that we've been seeing where, he's constantly getting flagged and it's really causing problems for the defense. Now, again, that's all based upon the perspective of the refs who are going to throw flags, so on and so forth. Every NFL referee crew is going to be either lax or more strict as far as the interpretation of the rule. But the problem is, regardless of that, Terrion Arnold is not 100% healthy. Hell, literally after the game, he said he's been playing at like 75%. I'm going to tell you this right now. We already got one guy who's not starting because he's injured and he can't play. We got another guy who played against the Bengals who probably was only at 85% maximum once he started the game, and then after the game, after re-aggravating the shoulder injury, he's now at 75%. And chances are he's probably going to play again against the Kansas City Chiefs because that's just what he does. He's going to try and power through it as much as possible. But on top of that, now there's questions as far as, okay, what about the depth that's behind, DJ Reed and Terrion Arnold? Because in that game against the Bengals, we put in Rock Ya-Sin, and, he also left the game not once but twice because he got injured. Now, we don't know the severity of the injury. We don't know if it was something minor, and it's not that big of a deal. But the problem is that, okay, the same word keeps popping up when we're talking about our secondary. Injuries. And if there's one thing I can tell you this right now, having a depleted secondary is definitely not something you want to deal with. Because it makes life ridiculously hard in the NFL currently today, because the name of the game in the NFL is who's got the better ability to throw the ball 9 times out of 10. And when you're already hurting for cornerbacks and, your depth is now starting to get eaten away at a little bit potentially, it kind of puts some people on edge. Because it's like, okay, here, we've got our top cornerback that's out right now. He's not coming back for the next 3 weeks, bare minimum. Our next guy is, at this point, kind of like a hit or miss depending upon the play, and he causes us problems as far as his ability to not cover without getting flagged. And then the guy that's directly behind him, which would be Rock Ya-Sin, he's also potentially dealing with an injury, which we don't know how major or minor it is, or if it's even something to concern ourselves with. But the point of the matter is that once you move past Arnold, you're kind of in the territory of, okay, you've got Amik Robertson, who's playing absolutely well. But then you've got to start looking at Avonte Maddox, who's played pretty well for us. And then you've got Rock Ya-Sin. Okay, that's great. But until you get Terrion Arnold back 100%, and the same thing with DJ Reed, you're kind of a little bit thin at the cornerback position. Now, I know the Lions just went out and they signed that former cornerback for the Seattle Seahawks. But let's call it for what it is. This is a guy that over the entire course of his career, he's not played particularly well anywhere he's been at, whether it's been with the Seahawks or other ball clubs. And it's like, okay, can he come in a pinch? Absolutely he can. But there's no way in hell I would want him on the field as a viable option that can fill in long term if we sustain another injury where, okay, we're now down to like 3 cornerbacks and we can't potentially lose anymore. So this is where this whole conversation about this topic of Brad Holmes and the Lions trying to bring somebody in really starts paying into a heavier kind of weight, because it's like, okay, here, cornerbacks are one of those positions that has a very high tendency to get injured throughout the course of a season. It's a very physically demanding sport. You're constantly having to go up against guys that are much bigger than you, and on top of that, because of the physical requirement of the position, whether it's running, tackling, jumping, whatever, there's a much higher likelihood of soft tissue injuries, which is what DJ Reed's dealing with. So the reason I'm having this conversation is because I know that there are going to be Lions fans out there that are going to want Brad Holmes to pick up the phone and bring somebody in, and not just any old somebody. They're going to want somebody who's got experience, but also is good. they're going to want somebody that you can plug in and he's going to be able to make a difference. Not somebody like what the Lions just literally signed about a week ago, and because of an emergency, we had to actually plug him into the Bengals game, which I guarantee you, the Lions were not at all wanting that to happen, but they had no choice. Now, I'm going to tell you this right now. I am not at all advocating for trading. If a trade is available and it makes sense as far as the cost in terms of compensation being given up and also what the cap is going to be on the back end, okay, now we can have a conversation there. But I don't think you're going to find a whole lot of buyers at this point. So for me, when you start really talking about options, you do have one trade option that I already know has been floated around the water cooler, which obviously is the cornerback for the Seahawks in Tariq Woolen. I don't know how I necessarily feel about that one because Tariq Woolen, there's a reason why he's not playing right now. And the reason why is because he hasn't really been playing very well over the last year or two. His first 2 years in the NFL, he was actually pretty damn solid. But for some oddball reason, ever since they either changed up the defensive scheme or whatever with their new head coach, he's not played the same. But, again, I only advertise a trade if all else fails. So, for me, there are free agent options that the Lions could seriously consider as an actual guy you could plug in, and that could potentially stem the tide until you start getting your guys back to full 100% health, primarily Arnold and Reed. Now, who are the guys that I think the Lions, if, and again, this is a very, very big if, but if they were to consider reaching out into the free agent market and deciding to bring somebody in, who would those guys be? Well, there are primarily three guys that I can think of. And of those three, there are two guys that I would strongly consider bringing in. The first one I would strongly consider bringing in is Stephon Gilmore. Obviously, the Lions should recognize this name because if I recall correctly, his nephew, cousin, whatever, maybe his younger brother, Steven, he has played for us. And if there's one thing the Lions ought to know about Stephon Gilmore is that even though he's 33, 34 years old, he can still play pretty damn well on the outside. This is a guy that has proven that over the years he can continue to hold down the fort on the outside. He can maintain an island. This is a guy that, hey, if you really want to invest a little bit in bringing in some veteran help who can really solidify that cornerback room, Gilmore would be an option. Now, the only thing about Gilmore that I'm kind of concerned about is how much money is he going to want? Obviously, he's a big-name free agent. Obviously, this is a guy that's waiting for the right opportunity to present itself to him to potentially join a team. I think that for the Lions, he might potentially be willing to take less because, well, number one, the Lions are one of the best teams in the NFL. Number two, they're tied for the best record in the NFL. And number three, they are one of the best teams in the NFC, if not the best team in the NFC, and maybe even the best one in the NFL right now, as far as being able to get to a Super Bowl. So for a guy like Gilmore, who obviously at this point is chasing another ring, that would be a very high alluring factor for him. So I would think that if the Lions could work their magic, they could potentially get Gilmore in the building for a 1-year, $7 or $8 million contract, which while that is a little bit on the steep side for a 1-year deal, for a guy like Gilmore who could bring his experience to the cornerback room, that's okay. That's one option. The other option that the Lions could consider is another guy that we're very familiar with, and that is former Eagles cornerback James Bradberry. Bradberry is a guy that played for the Eagles, and while he was there, he was a really good core centerpiece for them. Bradberry also has the ability of being flexible within defensive coverage schemes. We've seen him play outside. We've seen him play nickel. We've seen him play safety. This is a guy that would fit right into what the Lions want as far as a flexible defensive back who can really help them out in a multitude of different ways. Plus, On top of that, he is a little bit younger than Gilmore. So if for some reason it really works out, maybe the Lions might decide to bring him back on a short year deal after they were to bring him in for a 1-year deal this year to, again, stem the tide and, put a little patch job in there. A good patch job, but still a patch job. And for me, Bradbury, I think, fits very well for the Lions because Bradbury is, again, one of the biggest things when we're talking about guys you're going to bring in for free agents is they have to fit the cultural mindset first before anything else. I believe Gilmore and Bradbury definitely fit that to a T, which is why I recommend those two guys the most. Realistically, what it comes down to is, number one, does Brad Holmes and Dan Campbell think it's necessary to make that move? But then, number two, if they do think it's necessary, are they cultural fits that they can bring in and they're going to just flow right with the culture in the locker room? I think that they do. So, Stephon Gilmore's 1, Bradbury's 2. Who's the third cat? The third cat is a younger guy who, again, has a very recognizable name, Asante Samuel Jr. Now, Asante Samuel Jr. is a guy that has not exactly panned out as well as what a lot of people were hoping he was going to, considering his pedigree, but he's a guy that's young, he's developing, and there's a good opportunity that he could continue to grow if in the right system. I think that coming here to Detroit would possibly do that for him. Plus, with him being younger, there's the added benefit of, okay, you don't have to worry about his injury as much compared to Bradbury or Gilmore. Plus, on top of that, there's less likelihood that he's going to want a big-time contract on a 1-year deal. You could probably get Asante Samuel for probably like a 1-year, 4, 5, maybe max $6 million contract. Because let's understand something here. What I'm recommending or what I'm suggesting is if the Lions wanted to bring in some cornerback help that could really, fill in some gaps that are being dealt with the injury bug right now as far as that cornerback room is concerned, one of those three guys, they offer something that the Lions could potentially want to investigate and go after. But again, it all comes down to whether or not, one, they think they're cultural fits, but also, two, if it makes sense from a financial perspective. And again, that is ultimately what I think is the big deal for the Lions right now as far as why they're not making a whole lot of big-time moves, no matter what the position is because it's like, okay, there's not a lot of guys that are going to fit the culture of the Lions, number one. But then, number two, even if they do fit, it has to make financial sense. And with the Lions currently still in negotiations with Aiden Hutchinson to sign him to a contract, which we obviously don't know where those negotiations are, we just know they're having them, it makes one wonder, okay, here, when exactly are we going to potentially, number one, get that news? And then, if and when we do get it, what is that going to look like potentially for the Lions bringing in somebody if they should desire to do so in the case of an emergency? Now, let me clarify something here. Do I think that the cornerback room is currently at an emergency level? Not yet, I don't. But I will put a slight caveat on it. I think it's teetering dangerously close. Again, cornerbacks are one of those positions you want to have at least 4 to 5 deep. Currently, the Lions have what I would like to think is 3 deep because I don't think the injury to Yasin's all that big of an issue. But the issue with Arnold, with his injury that is not fully healed, plus the issue that he keeps having with, the penalties, that's where it starts getting into a bit of a really gray area. So it's like, okay here. Is it something the Lions should consider? Yes, I absolutely think they should. But whether or not I think they're going to deem it an emergency or something that they need to push the button on right now, that remains to be seen. But is it possible that Brad Holmes could be, dialing up the phone banks and talking to some people and possibly thinking about bringing somebody in? I think that's more than possible. I think that's very likely. But again, it all has to make sense, and it has to bear in mind with the Lions' process of, okay, are they culture fits? Are they scheme fits? And does it make sense financially? So again, there are some potential options here. Whether or not the Lions, decide to act upon them, we will have to wait and see. But anyway, folks, I decided I wanted to talk about this to kind of round out the day for today. Obviously, I've got more content that I'm already preparing on and working for tomorrow. So we'll get to that, obviously. Obviously, on top of that, also, I'm going to want to pay attention to the game tonight as the Chiefs play the Jags, because obviously we play the Chiefs on Monday night next week. So obviously that's a pretty big thing for us. But anyway, until the next time we meet, I just want to say thank you all for watching in another episode of MCM Motor City Mania. If you like what you saw, by all means, I highly encourage you all to do one of these three things: like, comment, and subscribe. If you like the content and have not yet subscribed, I hope to gain your subscription. I also hope that if you did subscribe in the past and you forgot to do so at the time, or you just subscribed and you not yet had a chance to do so, please, by all means, I want to encourage y'all, make sure you hit that bell notification icon so you guys never miss any more content that I push out. I hope y'all are doing well. I hope y'all got something in your life that makes you happy, makes you smile. God bless, my friends. And until the next time we meet, I'll see you all in the next episode.